Next, sir, we have a presidential memorandum for your attention. This memorandum requires the immediate declassification of all FBI files relating to the Crossfire hurricane investigation. This was obviously one of the instances of the weaponization of law enforcement powers of prosecution against you and others. We believe that it's long past time for the American people to have a full and complete understanding of what exactly is in those files.
Which gives the media the right to go in and check it. You probably won't bother because you're not going to like what you see. But this was total weaponization. It's a disgrace. Should never happen in this country. But now you'll be able to see for yourselves, all declassified. Is that correct? Would you say? All declassified?
Yes, sir.
Everything?
The FBI file with there's a classified annex, but other than that, this we'll put everything in the public eye.
Is anybody going to look? What about you? You going to look? And frankly, the FBI should be ashamed of themselves, and so should the Department of Justice, and so should Biden.
This is my video update on this Wednesday afternoon, March the 26th, coming to you from Nicosia, Cyprus. Let's talk about some news. And let's start things off with the release of the Russiagate Crossfire hurricane documents. Trump announced this yesterday, signing an executive order that the FBI files, all the FBI files in the Crossfire hurricane Russiagate hoax will be declassified and released to the public. I can't wait. I can't wait to get my hands on these documents. Oh boy, I bet you there are a lot of people freaking out about the release of the Russiagate hoax documents. A lot of people in the United States, a lot of very powerful people in the United States. I'm looking at you, Adam Schiff, and I bet you a lot of people outside of the United States are freaking out. I'm looking at you, Christopher Steele, and Professor Mifsud, if you even exist. Professor Mifsud, we're going to find out if Professor Mifsud ever existed. Stefan Halper and the Five Eyes and who else? Downer from Australia, all these people that were somehow involved in the Crossfire hurricane Russiagate hoax. I bet you they are freaking out. Can't wait to read these documents. You think Trump is not so fond of Stammer and the UK political class now? Just wait until the Russiagate hoax files are released, and we all get a good look at what the Five Eyes and the UK were up to during the whole Crossfire hurricane, and you'll see how upset Trump and MAGA are going to be with the MI6 and the UK and the Five Eyes and all of those guys, what they were up to in Trump's first term. A first term that affected the outcome in Ukraine. The Russiagate hoax affected Trump's first term. We got weapons to Ukraine in order for Trump to show that he was the toughest president ever on Russia and on Putin. So we got a huge escalation in Ukraine during his first term. We got the javelins. And no one is tougher on Russia than I am, as he had the whole impeachment Russiagate thing hanging over his head. And then you had all of the hatred and Russophobia cranked up to level 11 on a scale of 1 to 10. The hatred for Russia and for Putin, and Putin meddling in the U.S.'s democracy and the U.S. elections and in the collective West elections. That all came out of Russiagate. All of that stuff was a result of Russiagate. So anyway, it is going to be interesting to read these documents. Can't wait for them to be released. Now, let's talk about the U.S.-Russia Black Sea ceasefire, the deal that was reached yesterday late afternoon, early evening my time. When I wrapped up my video update in the afternoon, a couple of hours later, we got the news that the U.S. and Russia have agreed to a Black Sea ceasefire, which is very much what the Black Sea grain deal was 2 years ago. But actually, it's even more in Russia's favor this time around. And it was a wild day of news yesterday because early in the day, we were getting reports that there was going to be no statement from Russia or the United States as to what happened in Saudi Arabia, the 12-hour talks. There were going to be no statements from either side. Then we had reports which claimed that the Ukraine side, the Elensky regime, was not happy with the way the talks progressed between Russia and the United States. Then we had an interview from Lavrov, who did not get into the details of the discussions between the U.S. and Russia and Saudi Arabia, but did hint at discussions revolving around a Black Sea ceasefire and stuff like that. But Lavrov also was very clear that Russia was remaining firm on their June 2024 root causes Istanbul Plus position. They were not deviating from those minimum terms during his interview with Channel 1 yesterday. Then we had reports which claimed that the Green Goblin was going to put on a show. He was going to have a press conference. And as Alexander explained during the live stream we did on the Duran, the U.S. got wind, obviously, they got wind of the press conference that Elensky was about to take on, and they understood that Elensky was going to get ahead of what was agreed on in Saudi Arabia between the U.S. and Russia, and he was going to spin the narrative in his favor and in Ukraine's favor and try to sabotage the agreement between the U.S. and Russia. So the U.S. beat Elensky to the punch, and they released a statement as to what was agreed on by the U.S. and Russia. Basically, they announced that Russia and the U.S. had reached an agreement on a Black Sea ceasefire, and then they also announced that there were going to be significant sanctions relief for Russia so that Russia could export their grain, and commercial shipping can operate in the Black Sea, and various banks would be connected to SWIFT again, Russian banks. So the U.S. put out this statement, and then after the U.S. put out its statement, the Russians put out a much more detailed statement on what was agreed on during the talks in Saudi Arabia. And both the U.S. and Russia, they beat Elensky to the punch. Elensky was not able to shape the narrative to his advantage, and he ended up on the defensive when he had his press conference. Actually, he was very upset, Elensky, during his press conference. Very upset. He was complaining that the United States, they discussed sanctions relief with Russia, but they did not clear it with Ukraine, as if they need clearance from the Green Goblin. Incredible, huh? Man, he really does think he's Churchill, Elensky. Yeah, that's what he was upset about, that he did not get the clearance. The U.S. did not discuss it with him, so he can give the clearance for some sanctions relief to Russia and to Russian banks. So the documents are online. They're all over social media. What was agreed on, the Russians have posted the statement on various government websites. The U.S. has also posted the agreement as well on their government websites. And just to summarize what was agreed on, you have a Black Sea ceasefire. Commercial vessels will now be able to operate in the Black Sea. Military vessels, weapons going into Odessa will not be able to operate. So the Russians are going to make sure that there is no military cargo that is going to reach the port of Odessa. You're going to have Russian agricultural banks, actually most of the Russian banks that are dealing in shipping and in agriculture, are going to be reconnected to SWIFT, or the U.S. is going to help them reconnect to SWIFT, which means that the U.S. is going to now go to the Europeans, and they're going to tell the Europeans, you're going to have to lift all of your sanctions on the Russian banks that are dealing in commercial shipping and in agriculture. And what else? SWIFT, connected to SWIFT. Insurance as well. That was another big win for Russia. Those ships are going to now be insured. The insurance of the ships. It was a huge win for Putin and for Russia. They gave up nothing in these negotiations, and they got everything and then some. And the main thing that Russia got is they got sanctions relief in a big way. And Elensky, very upset. The Europeans and the EU, they're going to take a big L from all of this. They're going to have to eventually lift the sanctions and the restrictions that they have on Russian ships and on the agricultural stuff and the banks. And Elensky, well, he was made a fool of, and he was whining and complaining during his press conference. And the statements that are coming from the readouts from Russia and the U.S., what they say is that Russia and the United States agreed on, and then it lists what they agreed on. The United States and Russia agreed on, and then it lists what they agreed on. There's no mention of Ukraine in the readouts. There's no mention of the European Union, no mention of 008 Stammer or the UK. The U.S. did put out a readout for what they talked about with Ukraine when they were in Saudi Arabia. But the important part of all the meetings that happened in Saudi Arabia, the important statements, it's clear that you're looking at a bilateral negotiation between the United States and Russia. The statements say as much. So that's an update on the Black Sea ceasefire agreement. This is a statement coming from the White House. The United States and Russia have agreed to ensure safe navigation, eliminate the use of force, and prevent the use of commercial vessels for military purposes in the Black Sea. The White House statement reads, the U.S. has also pledged to help restore Russia's access to the world market for agricultural and fertilizer exports, lower maritime insurance costs, and enhance access to ports and payment systems for such a transaction. According to the White House, both Moscow and Washington remain committed to working towards achieving a durable and lasting peace to end the Ukraine conflict, the statement added. Let me read you a little bit from the Russian statement. The U.S. has vowed to help restore access for Russian agricultural and fertilizer exports to the world market, reduce the cost of insurance for maritime transportation, and enhance access to ports and payment systems for such transactions, according to the Kremlin statement. The agreement envisions lifting restrictions on Russian agricultural bank and other financial institutions, that's institutions with an S, involved in international trade of food and fertilizer, including reconnecting them to SWIFT payment system. It also includes removing sanctions on Russian-flagged vessels, port services, and the supply of agricultural machinery and related goods to Russia. What a big win for Putin. What a big win for Russia. What a huge, colossal win for Russia. What a win for the United States, because they really don't lose anything by agreeing to these terms. If anything, the United States gets even closer to normalizing relations with Russia, which will lead to all kinds of business benefits. So for the Trump administration, they don't lose anything. U.S. national interests are not in danger or jeopardized in any way. The Europeans are going to be forced to comply. They'll be convinced. Let's say they'll be convinced to comply. I'm sure they're going to be kicking and screaming and refusing to comply with these terms. But eventually using some carrots and some sticks, I would say more sticks, the United States is going to get the Europeans to get on board with these terms. And for Ukraine, well, not looking good for the Green Goblin. The U.S. is thinking about easing Russian sanctions, according to Trump. Kiev has accused Washington of weakening its position. Ukraine's Vladimir Elensky lashed out at Washington later in the day, accusing the U.S. of discussing the issue of sanctions with the Russian delegation without properly briefing Kiev on the matter. We did not agree to this, so it would be in a joint document. We believe that this is weakening of positions. This is a weakening of positions and a weakening of sanctions, Elensky claimed. We did not agree to this, Podolyak. We did not agree to this, Podolyak. I know, Mr. President, but I'm sorry to break the news to you. We're not involved in the real negotiations. What you talk about, Podolyak? How can we not be involved in the real negotiations? I am Churchill. Churchill is always in the negotiations. Yeah, so that's the update there. There was also an agreement on the energy infrastructure. The U.S. and Russia, they agreed to monitor and to enforce better the energy infrastructure ceasefire, and Russia actually provided a list of targets that Ukraine cannot go after. Power plants, pipelines, stuff like that. And the U.S. agreed. Ukraine, they gave a list of targets that Russia cannot go after. And the U.S. did not agree. Yeah, so Russia says all of this is off limits and everyone's in agreement. Okay, and then Ukraine says, well, all of this is off limits, and everyone says, no, that's not energy infrastructure. Those targets that you've provided on this list, Elensky, are still fair game. Let me see if I actually have that statement. Russia and U.S. agree list of energy facilities for truce with Ukraine. The types of facilities covered under the truce include oil and gas processing and storage facilities, including pumping stations and pipelines, electricity producing and distribution sites, nuclear power plants, and the dams of hydroelectric plants. The truce may be prolonged beyond the 30-day period should both sides agree, Moscow noted. If either party violates the deal, the other can consider itself free from its obligations, it added. So if one of the parties breaks the ceasefire, then the other party is out of the deal. So if Ukraine decides to break the ceasefire again, as they've been doing for the past week, then Russia can go to the United States and say, well, here you go. They broke the ceasefire again, so we can retaliate symmetrically to what they've done, or we can just pull out completely from the ceasefire deal. So I'm looking to see if I have the statement of what Elensky submitted and what was turned down, but I don't think I have it bookmarked. Oh no, I do. Here we go. All right, I have it bookmarked. Elensky revealed that a list of facilities Kiev wanted listed as strategic infrastructure to be protected under a truce did not make the final document. No penalties for violating the truce have been envisioned, since the U.S. really wanted all this not to fall through, Elensky claimed. All right, so Lavrov, in his interview that he gave to Channel 1 yesterday, he talked about Nord Stream. That's right, he talked about Nord Stream. Russia, U.S. discussed Nord Stream pipeline issue, Lavrov. According to the Russian foreign minister, it will be interesting if the Americans use their influence on Europe and will force it not to reject the Russian gas. As I was saying in multiple videos, Russia and the United States working together on how to get Nord Stream back up and running. Unbelievable stuff, huh? The one administration, they decide to blow up Nord Stream. Gilligan and the skipper on the Andromeda yacht. They decide to blow up Nord Stream, and now you have a new administration, and they're trying to normalize relations with Russia. They're negotiating with Russia, and they're talking about all kinds of things, not only just Project Ukraine. And you could be getting some sort of an agreement on Nord Stream. Incredible, man. How did Europe put themselves in such a position? How did Germany screw itself so bad? Here is what Lavrov said. Moscow and Washington are currently in talks on the Nord Stream pipelines. Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov told Channel 1 in an interview, of course there are differences, but is it only in the interests of Russia and the United States to restore normal energy supply in Europe? Nord Stream pipelines are being discussed, he said. It will be interesting if the Americans use their influence on Europe and will force it not to reject the Russian gas. That would look surreal, the Russian minister said. In his words, fuel costs are several times higher for Europe and its businesses than for U.S. businesses. At the same time, people like Robert Habeck, Ursula von der Leyen, and Boris Pistorius, all of them say that they will never allow restoring the Nord Stream pipelines. These people are either mentally unhealthy or suicidal, said the Russian minister. I can definitely see some sort of joint venture between the United States and Russia with regards to Nord Stream. I can definitely see it. I'll give it maybe 3 weeks ago, I would have said 15, 20% chance. Let's bump that up to some sort of U.S.-Russia joint venture. Let's bump that up to, what do you guys think, 40%? Let's say 35% chance that the U.S. and Russia join forces if everything is normalized. We still have a long way to go, and a lot of things can go wrong, but if relations are normalized and the U.S. and Russia decide to do business, I can see some sort of joint venture when it comes to Nord Stream. I'll give it a 35% chance of it happening. The Russian Foreign Ministry also commented on the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. All the talk about the United States or someone else getting control of the ZNPP. The Russian Foreign Ministry said, no way, that will never happen. That is what they said. There will never be anyone in control of the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant other than the Russian Federation. It doesn't get more clear than the statement from the Russian Foreign Ministry. Germany is demolishing power plants. That's right. They are demolishing power plants. Germany has demolished its most advanced coal-fired power plant after a mere 6 years of operation. The Moorburg facility in Hamburg, built at a cost of 3 billion euros, generating 1,654 megawatts, generating 1,654 gigawatts. Is that what Doc Brown was using in Back to the Future? The flux capacitor, gigawatts? I don't know. Megawatts here. But yeah, it looks like that plant has been destroyed. Coal-fired power plant. Man, what is Germany doing? Crazy, man. Germany's crazy. The people that are leading Germany are crazy. Absolutely wild. Now, that's not going to turn out well for Germany, for the price of energy, destroying this power plant. All they're going to be left with is LNG, which is controlled by the United States and by Russia. Russia, the US, and Qatar. They'll have LNG and they'll have this Nord Stream joint venture. That'll be Germany's access to energy. So Tulsi Gabbard, she was speaking to the Senate, and she said that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Supreme Leader Khamenei has not activated the nuclear weapons program. This is coming from the ex-account of Iran Observer, who says this means that Trump is receiving factual intelligence and not fabricated Iraq WMD type intel. So that's what Tulsi Gabbard said, much to the dismay of many Iran hawks and people that want to, in the US Congress, that want to go to war with Iran. Much to their dismay, Tulsi Gabbard said that they are not building nukes. Give her credit. Give her credit for saying that. Richard Grenell put a post on X saying, let's be clear about the Budapest Memorandum. The nukes were Russia's and were leftovers. Ukraine gave the nukes back to Russia. They weren't Ukraine's. This is an uncomfortable fact. Why is it uncomfortable? It's a fact, and it was for the better of humanity, for the better of the world that Russia controlled these nuclear weapons after the USSR. That was a good thing that happened from the Budapest Memorandum. Can you imagine what would be going on in the world if Elensky and Budanov and the Banderites had access to these nuclear weapons? It would have been a disaster. So anyway, that is what Richard Grenell posted on X. And let's do some clown worlds. An update on the Waltz signal story. Trump is backing Waltz. He is backing Mike Waltz. Trump comments on Waltz glitch. The national security advisor who reportedly leaked a military secret has learned a lesson, the U.S. president has said. In a phone interview with NBC News on Tuesday, Trump downplayed the incident, referring to the situation as the only glitch in 2 months and asserting that it had no impact at all on the military operation. Michael Waltz has learned a lesson and he's a good man, the president said. So Trump is sticking with Waltz. The Gray Zone posted a really good article on the Signal chat app scandal, if you can call it that, with the title, Why Did Jeffrey Goldberg Leave the Bomb Yemen Signal Chat? And I'll put a link to this article down below. It's a good article. It makes some excellent points. But basically what was going on, and this makes a lot of sense, is that Waltz was trying to push for more escalation and more war in Yemen. And so he was working with Goldberg, or cultivating a journalist, Goldberg, to try and get Goldberg, who also wants war in Yemen and ultimately war in Iran, to push the story of going to war in Yemen and eventually going to war with Iran. So they were kind of working together. At least Waltz was cultivating Goldberg to push the neocon more war narrative, and that's how Goldberg accidentally, or maybe on purpose, we don't know. That's how he ended up in the chat. And then when things got a bit too much for Goldberg, and he realized, crap, this could be some sensitive intelligence that is being talked about in this chat. I better leave. That's when he left. But if he wanted to stop a conflict in Yemen, he would have stayed in the chat and he would have reported on what's going on if he wanted to stop the conflict in Yemen. But he left the chat because he wants an escalation in Yemen and an escalation towards Iran. That's why he left the chat and said, these are national security issues. I'm not going to publish this stuff. At least is what he's saying. I'm not going to publish what intel was talked about. And I will leave it there because Goldberg, he doesn't want to prevent war. He wants the war to escalate in Yemen towards Iran. But basically, it looks like the neocon wing of the Trump administration, Mike Waltz, they were trying to get Goldberg on board so he can push the escalation in Yemen escalation in Iran narrative, and that's how all of this blew up in everyone's face. At least that's how it looks. Anyway, this article does a much better job at explaining what happened than I'm doing, and I believe this is Max Blumenthal, so he does a good job in this piece. So I will put a link in the description box down below. What else? Lithuania is saying that they will continue to isolate Russia, bypassing the United States. Oh my God! Everybody in Russia, everybody that is watching this video in Russia. That's some bad news, huh? Lithuania is going to continue to isolate you. Game over, man. Game over for Russia, man. If Lithuania is going to continue to isolate Russia, I don't know what options Russia has. I just don't know. Even if the United States normalizes relations with Russia, Lithuania is not. That's bad news. That is really bad news. Anyway, do we have any other clown worlds to discuss? The first photos of Jude Law as Putin emerge. The British actor portrays the Russian leader in the political thriller, The Wizard of the Kremlin. Yeah, so this movie is being filmed in Riga, and Jude Law is going to play an imaginary Putin. From what I understand, this is a work of fiction, but it's based on Putin of the 90s and people around Putin in the 90s and the rise of Putin in the 90s in Russia. Even though it's fiction, the characters are obviously Putin and people around Putin at that time. The Wizard of the Kremlin is the name of this movie. I'm sure it's going to be very complimentary of Putin and Russia, right? Absolutely. They're not going to demonize Putin or smear Putin, are they? Is Hollywood going to do that? No, of course not. Anyway, that's the video, everybody. theduran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, ODYSEE, BitChute, Telegram, Rockfin, and X. Go to the Duran shop, pick up some merch like what I'm wearing in this video update. The link is in the description box down below. Take care.